And I'm going to introduce them to you briefly. We are going to have some presentations from them, one at a time. Firstly, we have, let me introduce myself, actually, because I have not done that. My name is Mosa Mushabela from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. And I am a professor of public health. I'm very much interested in people-centered health and interventions. Even as we discuss technology and innovation, I'm always kind of trying to get us to think about things from the people-centered perspective. We've been working with some of the colleagues here, ICGB and others, to try and think about how we can move innovation forward in the context of Sub-Saharan Africa, in the context of Africa and developing countries more generally. So I will be moderating the discussion this afternoon, the first person who's going to present to us is Dr. Lawrence Banks, who is the Director General of the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology since July 2019, just before the COVID-19 pandemic, even before you got your feet wet. He's got the general interest in viruses that cause tumors, and his current preoccupation is the human papilloma viruses. That we know, of course, cause several tumors in human, including the cancer of the cervix, and cause death in many women in developing countries. He's also responsible as DG of ICGB to think about ways to expand the biotechnology sector in the member states of ICGB. Dr. Lawrence Banks, you're most welcome. Let me introduce the other colleagues before you step up to the podium. Next to Dr. Banks is Dr. Thomas Hatton, who is a professor at Johns Hopkins University, Bloomberg School of Public Health. He is a professor of environmental health and engineering, wears several hats actually, and currently the director of the Center for Alternatives to Animal Testing. He is a chair, you're gonna tell us how to pronounce this, Duran Gambsbinden, chair of evidence-based toxicology. He will also be chatting to us about disruptive technologies, including AI and bioengineering in this regard. We have Professor Pedro Terblanche, who is the Managing Director of African Biologics and Vaccines. She brings with her a wealth of experience working in the biotechnology industry. She is a professor of business development at Northwest University. She has previously worked with a number of entities, including Pelchem, Nexa, South African Medical Research Council, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. And finally, we have Charles Gore, who is the Executive Director of Medicine's Patent Pool since 2018. I think, Charles, your feet were wet when COVID-19 hit. You were already aware and comfortable with the geographic outlay of MPP. He is a founder and former president of the World Hepatitis Alliance, and also brings a lot of experience from public health, patient advocacy in particular, and the building of coalitions around specific issues that require advocacy. So these are the panel members, friends and colleagues. I'm going to invite Dr. Lawrence Banks to take us through his first presentation. And after that, we'll take all the other presentation. And when we are done, we'll open it up for discussion. If you've got any questions, please note them down for discussion. I might open for 1 or 2 questions after each presentation, just for clarification. And then towards the end of the session, we'll have a more general discussion. And I hope you do write down your questions because now that I know you, I might invite you to, raise questions as we go along. Lawrence, thanks. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moshe. And I'd first of all just like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the panel for joining us today. It's really a real privilege for me to be with such a esteemed group of scientists. So thank you for being here. And of course to you for joining us for what I think should be a really interesting session. When we think about the title of social justice, I think nothing more than the pandemic has shown quite clearly how much biotechnology really has played a massive role in the course of the last 2 years. That has really driven us through that period, whether it's through developing diagnostics, therapeutics, and obviously vaccines. And so biotechnology was at the core of that. And that really is relevant as we go forward. And so as we face future challenges, I think biotechnology has the potential to answer many of our problems related to agriculture, climate change, obviously health issues, and aspects that are also related to quality of life in really many parts of the world. So I think I don't want to push biotechnology too hard, but I think it really is at the cornerstone of what can take us forward globally to really make a difference. And the main point for me is ensuring that these technologies are accessible to all. And that is the basis for what ICGB does. And so what I'm going to do in these next sort of 10 to 15 minutes is try and give you an overview of what ICGB is doing to try and make these technologies available for all nations, and doing that on a variety of different levels. So how do we move there? Okay, so just to say a little bit about ICGB, because this is also very relevant for today's discussion. We are an international organization with 66 member countries, and so that means we are operating globally. We have research institutes located in Trieste, in Italy, which is also our headquarters, and labs in New Delhi, and also here in Cape Town. And one of the things that sets us apart a little bit from most of the other organizations that are working in this development sphere is that we actually have laboratories. And so we're working on many of the areas in which we're aiming to support our membership. And so we have in-house expertise and capabilities that can be directly transferred to assist in many of these different endeavors. And Africa, we're really expanding our footprint. We have 6 new countries that are just in the process of joining. Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, and Angola joined last year. And we also have Rwanda, Djibouti, and Botswana very close to completing membership. So our activities on the African continent are really growing quite dramatically. And this is really what we're about. It's to provide a center of excellence for research and training in molecular biology and biotechnology, specifically addressing the needs of our membership. And I like to think of us as doing science for development. And of course, this is all integrated into the Sustainable Development Goals, which to me are the goals which really will help drive social justice and ensure that everybody can gain access to these relevant technologies. And so what I'm going to do is highlight some of these which I think are relevant for what we're doing. Obviously, there's the science that we do in our labs, in the 3 institutes. But the first point I want to make is that this is all collaboration. We're not just there working in an ivory tower, working on our own little research projects. We're doing it with our partners in our member countries. And so that's one of the key elements. International scientific collaboration is something that we're really fostering, promoting, and as we've seen over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, this is absolutely fundamental. And this is really, the details are not really relevant, but we have scientists from more than 40 different countries working in our laboratories. So it really is a tremendous international scientific environment. If we think about the SDGs, well, health and well-being is obviously a cornerstone of those noble goals, and we're very strong in various aspects related to infectious disease and non-communicable diseases. And obviously, during the course of the pandemic, I'm not going to go into the science, but we did a lot of work looking for novel compounds that could be therapeutics. This is the result of some work that we did in Trieste, where we identified niclosamide, which is a treatment for helminth infections, is actually extremely effective against SARS-CoV-2, and this is now in late-stage clinical trials in India. We also, one of the things that we realized during the pandemic was that Africa was really very poorly prepared in terms of diagnostic capabilities. And so what we did was we teamed up with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and also with New England Biolabs to trial some novel diagnostics in rural settings in Africa. And in the first phase, this included Cameroon, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria. And this was extremely successful. And in the height of the pandemic, we were using these diagnostics to really make a difference in remote settings where you had intermittent power supply and all the issues associated with the problems that we were initially encountering with regular PCR diagnostics. This has now got rolled out further to a further 5 countries in Africa, which I think is a great network that we're developing. And one of the aims of this is also to assist in the development of local production for these diagnostics. But also ICGB is now acting also as a centre to trial new diagnostics, specifically targeting low-resource settings. So if you have a healthy population, you need to be able to feed them. And as we know, this is really, we're in real trouble at the moment with the crises that the world is facing, both in terms of fertilizer and food production. And we have a very strong teams working on various aspects of agriculture, both in terms of crop improvement, development of strains that are resistant to various forms of stress, as well as the development of novel biofertilizers and biopesticides. And this is one of the things that is really really taken off in many of our member countries. And this is identifying plant microbiomes and basically using these bacterial consortia to provide novel and environmentally friendly biofertilizers. You can also use these microbial consortia to treat disease plants as well. So really extremely effective in an environmentally friendly fashion. One of the things that is also critical when you think about development of new technologies and getting new technologies to market is that you have to have regulatory processes. The people on the panel today are much more expert than these in elements than I am. But just to say that we've been working very closely with countries in sub-Saharan Africa to help them develop regulatory processes for implementation of technologies associated, particularly in agricultural sector, when you think in terms of development of genome editing and traditional genetic modification techniques. So in a world that is facing massive challenges related to climate change, we really do try to make an impact in terms of assisting our membership. And this is particularly strong in New Delhi, in our industrial biotechnology sector, which is all funded as a special program from the Indian Department of Biotechnology. And some of the work that they're doing there is obviously developing technologies for the development of second and third generation biofuels. They're also working on bioremediation and carbon capture processes. So really All of those technologies are currently in various phases of transfer, either to industry or to partners in our member countries. And there's a lot of interest in some of these technologies, both within South Africa and also the rest of the continent. Clearly, if you have the science and good science, you then want to be able to ensure that the capacity to carry out that science can also occur in all settings. And so quality education is really the next point. And I think this capacity building capability of ICGB is one of our real strong points. And so we have obviously regular fellowship programs that we can use for PhDs and postdocs, but we have some wonderful collaborations. For instance, this program that is being run with the UN Technology Bank and the World Academy of Sciences is providing fellowship training opportunities specifically for young scientists coming from least developed countries. And these are coming from countries that are frequently left behind and do not get access to these types of training activities. We have a substantial number of fellows on board ICGB, and as you can see, they come from all over the world. But also something that is extremely important is South-South collaboration. And I think, again, this is an area which is often overlooked. And so what ICGB is doing is to develop programs where we're promoting exchange and collaboration amongst our membership, which, as you can see, is mostly within the Global South. And learning from each other through these types of interactions is extremely important. We also obviously perform other types of educational activities, such as running meetings and courses and workshops. These can be simple symposia going through to really quite complex practical courses where we're specifically targeting a specific technology. And one thing just to sort of allude to, we like to make all our material freely available. And so all of our seminars, all of our meetings and courses, these are all recorded and are available on our website for free of charge. And I think these are excellent tools for teaching, specifically in universities. For lecturers who have a series of lessons on a specific topic, you can go directly to the source material where you've got a world leader talking on that particular subject. And I think that's really, really very useful. And of course, we work with the young people. They're our future. And this is some pictures from just before the pandemic, when we had a fantastic time in South Africa National Science Week, working with school children on basically getting them interested in science. So obviously, if you want social justice, it means you have to reach everyone. And I think we all agree that there are still major issues in terms of gender equality and both gender equality, but also other inequalities, both in terms of geographic location and inequalities within countries. And so we really have a fantastic program for promoting science for women. This is a collaboration with the UN Office on South-South Cooperation, Empower Fellowship, specifically targeting women scientists to come and work in the labs in Cape Town and in New Delhi. And again, we're very grateful to the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. They have been an amazing supporter of ICGB over all of this period. And this fellowship program, again, is specifically targeting women scientists in Africa to be able to come and gain training in ICGB laboratories. And our women do extremely well. They're really award-winning in a whole variety of different disciplines. So they're really, they come to ICGB and really do benefit from the experience. Like I mentioned earlier on, partnerships is what it's all about. And the pandemic really did show that really in a very clear manner. And again, through the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, they're supporting a really exciting project in the Horn of Africa, where we're building capacity in Ethiopia and Djibouti in various aspects related to biotechnology. And here in South Africa, with the Standards and Trades Development Facility, we have a really beautiful program aiming to try and reduce residual pesticide mitigation within the SADC region, and thereby directly contributing to opening up export markets for many of these products. Finally, I'd like to finish with, it's great doing the science, it's great doing the training, we build local capacity, but we have to make a product at the end of the day if you really want to make a difference. And again, the people on the panel today will say a lot more about the steps that are needed for that. But one of the things that ICGB has is we're very fortunate in that we have a technology transfer group which can produce biosimilars at a level at a quality that meets the FDA and the European Pharmacopoeia. So it's not substandard products. We're producing things that really make the highest standards. These products, as you all know, are extremely expensive normally, but through ICGB technologies, we can transfer those at prices, because they're all off patent, we can transfer them at prices which are really, really attractive to getting these products to market in really very low resource settings where money is really in very short supply. Much of this technology during the pandemic, we also made videos so that people who are interested in these technologies can at least see what types of investment they would need, what sort of training is on offer, and can really help them initiate some of the early decisions that they might need to make in terms of the technologies that will be required to go into production. And we're also working very closely with the WHO in actually providing dedicated training workshops for scientists, particularly from low and middle income countries, where they can be trained in quality control processes as well as in practical training in bioprocessing for building local capacity in these various forms of activities. And we don't do it just with biotherapeutics, as I mentioned earlier on. We're also doing very similar activities in agriculture, where we're looking at the development of biofertilizers. And this is we have a huge network of collaborations all around the world where we're helping in the development of these novel forms of fertilizer. And so with that, I'll stop. I think I've tried to give you an overview of what we're about. Obviously, the aim is by addressing all of these points, we're hoping we will be able to alleviate poverty in many of our member countries. And of course, the upside of that as well is increasing peace, justice and stability amongst our membership. And so with that, I'll stop. And as I say, I like to think of us as using science to promote development. And this is my email if anybody wants to contact me at any point. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lawrence Banks. This is the Director General of ICGB once more. And I really appreciate how ICGB seems to be positioned to be able to deal with issues of inequality. And I think in particular, I like the starting point that you need to start off with good science. You need to start off with excellent science. But in addition to that, you need to build capacity. You need to make sure that your material are available, are freely accessible for people to use them. And also you need to have programs that are intentional in reducing inequality. And I think that needs to be visible so that we can then be able to see how these entities are actually contributing, and these programs are contributing towards social justice. And of course, we need to reduce costs of product in terms of technology transfer or any other means whereby the whole product development value chain is made possible, not only in places that are in the global north, but also in the global south, where a lot of the membership is also housed. I think it does raise a little bit of a question around how one becomes a member and why certain countries are excluded, because if countries are excluded from membership, that also raises concerns about not being able to have access to the technologies that ICGB has to offer. Let me invite our next speaker, Thomas Hatang, who is going to speak to disruptive technologies, including AI and bioengineering.
Thank you very much. I'm professor of public health in Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and social equity and justice is one of the leading themes of our entire school, which is the leading school of public health for 110 years almost now. I have a couple of conflicts of interest to declare, both for the technologies I'm talking about. I'm the field chief editor for Frontiers in Artificial Intelligence. I have a couple of involvements also for what we call microphysiological systems, so bioengineered systems, so please take everything I say with a grain of salt. There is 3 ways of getting sick: genetics, infections, and exposure. We have been talking a lot about genetics in the last 40 years, but not so much about exposure. But I believe that it is, first of all, for biomedicine, our goal to produce models in order to understand, prevent, and cure diseases. That's what we are all about. And I think very importantly, we're not 70-kilogram rats. The tool which we have been using mostly over the last 100+ years is actually failing us more than we think. My interest is mainly in drug and chemical safety, so the exposure side of disease, though I'm also have a professorship for molecular microbiology and immunology and some infectious diseases. The genetic side, as I said, 40 years of research have shown us that 5% of diseases roughly are genetic, 40% have a genetical component, but we have to believe that about 70 to 90% of diseases have an exposure component. They are somehow impacted by chemicals or other lifestyle factors, and we don't have really good understanding of this. This concept has, in recent years, been described as the exposome, so the totality of influential factors on a human being, which we are only starting to organize in a more systematic way, and I will come back to this later. There's obviously a lot of topics in Africa which have to deal with environmental and occupational exposures, which are unique to or let's say different to the transatlantic environment I'm typically working in. So I think a lot of our work in trying to explore these as causal and aggravating factors in disease is an important aspect of making a more social equity in safety sciences. I'm going to talk about 2 disruptive technologies which ever-accelerating velocity are entering in how we do research in the life sciences. And these are the so-called microphysiological systems. These are systems where we create organ equivalents based on human cells, which have some aspects of the architecture and the functionality of these. And I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. I will show the QR code later again for all of the slides if you're interested to get them, but I also have lodged a couple of papers to give you access to some of them, which I deposited. Very quickly, just to show you that the current tool, the main tool, which is rodent type of experiments, is failing us. We did this study a few years ago, 2018, where we showed for 2,800 chemicals, which were tested at least 3 times. Some of them 100 times in the same animal test. The best animal tests possible, guideline studies according to GLP, and we found them only 81% reproducible. And this reproducibility came mainly from the non-toxic substances, which were non-toxic and stayed non-toxic. The toxic one was only 69% reproducible. And these were the workhorses of toxicology, the skin and eye and short-term tests, but there's no reason to assume that any other animal tests are any better. On the contrary, we see that the big studies in toxicology, also done under high quality, are only about 60% predictive between mouse and rat. That's the quality of data we have. There's no reason to assume that they're any better in predicting human effects. I don't want to say that cell culture is just good, because it is more ethical probably, but it has many problems as well. About 25% of the cell lines we are using are not what we believe they are. They're not the right organ, not the right species, not the right gender. 15 to 25% of our cell cultures are infected with mycoplasma. Enormous genetic instabilities, loss and multiplications of genes, and culture artifacts on the way we're dealing. So this is a problem. But there is a game changer, and this game changer is the advent of stem cells, human stem cells, because finally we have human cells available, and the bioengineering, which gives us now the possibility to create organ equivalents from these. And a lot has happened over the last 10, 15 years of organoids, of tissue organs on chip type of systems, human on chip now with many organs at the same time. These are 2 workshops we organized between opinion leaders worldwide to assess where we are and what can be done. If you don't want to read the big article, there is a summary in Science last year of 3.5 pages only, which describes how these systems are at the moment accelerating drug development and others. And we just organized the first World Summit in this field. I found 2 co-hosts for this event, which took place in New Orleans this year. And we had quite a few participants. Most remarkably, about 10% of the participants came from the Food and Drug Administration in the US. And this is the most important driving force at the moment for this field. We in the US are only 4% of the world population, but we are 48% of the entire drug market and 64% of the drug market for drugs under patent. And this is while all of the pharmaceutical companies only look for what the FDA is interested in. And this is at the moment really a remarkable development. The second Microphysiological Systems World Summit will be organized next year in Berlin. I brought some flyers about this, and there is quite a few travel grants for not only young scientists, but also for scientists from developing countries. And I would hope that you just... Thanks a lot. So this is a shameless plug for our conference, but we have to get it done. We also created on this occasion an International MPS Society, and we are really trying to organize this area in order to make something happen and exchange. My work has always been a lot around quality assurance. I've been leading European Commission's validation body for these type of systems. And we have earlier this year published guidance on good cell culture practice, which is now extended to these type of microphysiological systems. Because if it's not quality, we will fail with these methods and this will backfire. I will show you for a moment what we are doing with these type of technologies in our own lab, just to give you a feeling for what we are interested in. This was one of the first brain organoids published in Nature in 2013, and they looked very much brain-like, but they were individuals. Each and every of these brain organoids from human stem cells looked different. In 2016, we were the first to announce at AAAS the mass production of brain organoids. Really thousands of these in one batch, and the Financial Times did title on the front page of the journal, "Mass-produced mini-brains to spark rethink over drug testing on animals." And since then, we have been using these in a variety of diseases, among them autism, COVID-19, and glioblastoma, and I will very quickly show you what we did in this. Our main interest is in autism, because we see that this is a disease which is incredibly increasing. In the 70s, 1 in 10,000 children was diagnosed with autism. Now it is 1 in 44 last year. Yeah, and you see the increase just over the last few years. This cannot be explained by genetics alone, though it is a partially genetic disease, but there must be exposure and lifestyle factors in this. So we are interested whether developmental neurotoxicity, the influence of chemicals during fetal development, is possibly impacting, and we have organized 4 international conferences and 9 workshops on this topic. In our own research last year, we showed the first example using these brain organoids that a genetic defect and a pesticide, in this case, which are synergizing to produce developmental neurotoxicity. Chlorpyrifos is a broadly used insecticide, and the 2 are the first example of a gene risk factor and a pesticide or chemical risk factor which are synergizing. This gave us actually just 2 months ago a $12 million grant from the NIH now to test this out with 18 centers and 175,000 children, where we are trying to find these type of connections in children and at the same time verify them in our type of system with brain organoids which show defects and exposure. COVID-19 was a challenge for all of us. We used instantly when this disease became available and it was clear that it is also affecting the brain. We used this and showed already in May of 2020 that the coronavirus is actually infecting brain cells, neurons. As you can see here, each of these red dots is one of these coronaviruses. And this has been confirmed shortly after by 10 other groups, and clinical findings are supportive of this being one of the reasons for long COVID. Glioblastoma is an aggressive cancer of the brain. We can also graft it into these brain organoids, and as you can see here, they are growing, they're expanding. This is the dense matter, and we can test for a given patient in a personalized way which type of chemotherapeutic to use or what is good, challenging at the same time healthy tissue and the tumor. And this gives you a bit of a feel. Many more diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, other infections have been studied in this. What you can see here is one of our brain organoids, and each of these yellow flashes is a neuron depolarizing. So when I saw this first, I often said, oh, they are thinking. Then some people were shocked. Are they conscious? Is there something? And I very easily said, they are thinking, but they have nothing to think about without input and output. Over the last 3 years, we thought about what about changing this, giving them input and output. And this is why we created something we are now calling organoid intelligence, OI, as a synthetic biological AI. So instead of what has been done over the last 60 years, making our computers more brain-like, creating artificial intelligence, we are trying to make a brain culture more computer-like. It sounds crazy, but if you compare the best computer in the world, a supercomputer which this year in Kentucky for the first time exceeded 1 exaflop, which is a measure of computing power, for $600 million installed. And 1 exaflop is exactly the computational capacity of a single human brain, which does this at about 1/1,000,000th of this energy used in 1.4 kilogram. If you compare this the other way around, this is a current laptop, which is also about 1.4 kilogram. It has 10 teraflops, which means it has 100,000th of the capacity of the human brain, and is using about the same energy. You can also say, if you know Moore's law, every second year our computers become twice as powerful at half the price. It is only in 33 years that your laptop is as powerful as a human brain, if we would continue with this curve. So organoid intelligence is trying to combine organoids with AI, giving them input and output and communicating them. And we just published in August this year that we developed a type of EEG, the smallest EEG and electroencephalogram in the world. This is a 350 micrometer brain organoid, and you see these shells which are folding around them and allow us to record from the brain organoid. We held a community-forming workshop on organoid intelligence in February this year with 50 eminent experts, and we are expecting to publish a series of papers now in January with Frontiers, our partners in crime, will be released in January 2023, and the journalists interested in the topic, please contact me for a heads up on this release. These type of systems, and you might have seen from our partners, Cortical Labs in Australia, a month ago, they showed that a brain cell culture can play the computer game Pong. These type of developments are crazy, simply crazy. Yeah? They allow us to study basic functions of memory and learning. They allow us to possibly develop computational biology in a different way as biological computing. And the aspects of intelligence in a dish might help us for neurodevelopmental disorders or Alzheimer and similar, where cognition is affected for drug research. Let me switch to AI. And AI depends on the synergy of 3 technologies. On the one hand, there's data. And the data in the world are exploding. 60% more data every year, very stable, which means 84% of all data in the world have been produced in the last 6 years. Yeah? Everything we have in data-wise. Our computers, we already mentioned, about 40% increase in computational power per year for 50, 60 years. And the AI models they became 8 times more potent every year in the last 10 years. Every year, 8 times more potent. Altogether, a billion-fold increase over the last 60 years in our models and possibilities to compute. 1 billion-fold increase. And artificial intelligence is essentially making big sense of big data. That's at least my favorite definition of this. And I think that there is democratizing power in artificial intelligence, especially as it has turned out as an area which is a lot about open access, about sharing of data. It is also increasingly democratizing through training. But still, there's a couple of issues like IP rights, governance, and others, and I think we have to discuss how nobody is left behind with these technologies which are in principle cheap and are involving. The most remarkable changes are taking place in natural language processing at the moment. You cannot imagine how this is increasing. These are just figures over the last few years. GPT-3 in 2020 was trained on the entire internet with 175 billion parameters. And only half a year later, it was publicly available for free. We are expecting GPT-4 to be available within the next 2 months, and probably another big leap in natural language processing. These systems in the meantime essentially can read your scientific paper already, probably as good as a PhD student, but they read millions of papers if you want them to, not one per week. This is a software tool my research associate Tom Lichtefeld has developed. It's free of charge, which does some of this work to systematically analyze the literature. Please feel free to test out. Sysref.com has been used for about 6,000 semi-automatic reviews and is increasingly using technologies of AI for data extraction. I don't have the time to go into details. Our own work is into AI replacing animal testing. Already in 2018, we showed that we were better than an animal study for 190,000 chemicals where we predicted its properties just from computational approaches. We have shown this for human data, that it predicts better than the animal-human toxicology for skin sensitization. Last month, we showed that within an hour we could run the equivalent of 38,000 animal studies, which are costing $250 million at a quality which is again better than the reproducibility of the animal tests. And we are just about to publish that we are also outperforming animal studies for cancer and reproductive toxicity. So it's amazing what is happening here. I just had the privilege to organize a workshop for the Department of Defense in the US, which is at the moment advancing the next revolution in toxicology, and this workshop calls on a human exposome project, as I said in the beginning, and this will come out as a report next month. We created an exposome collaborative already, and we are trying to bring this together with AI. We call this exposome intelligence, so really trying to systematically expand and analyze exposures as an influential factor of disease. And with this, I would like to close. We started off with alternatives to animal testing, and this has been developing now to AI, OI, and EI as the 3 driving forces for our research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Hatang. So because of time, we're just going to go ahead and invite Pedro to come and address us from African Biologics. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody, and Lawrence, thank you very much for the opportunity to share. Can I have my first slide, please? Go back. So what I want to do as part of the contribution to this session, which is focusing on social justice and innovation, I'm going to use the mRNA hub program case study to demonstrate innovation at the heart of focusing on social justice. So this is a WHO medicines patent pool coordinated and managed program with a hub based here in South Africa. And I'll take you through a journey of development, but also particularly demonstrating the importance of cross-value chain innovation. So if we look at the last 200 years of medical and health innovations, we will all agree that the top three are vaccines. The biggest public health impact from innovation in the medical field came from vaccine development. But if we look at the general timeline to develop a vaccine suitable and to demonstrate safety and efficacy for human use, it spans sometimes 20 years or more than 20 years. This is a difficult field. It is biological manufacturing, lots of uncertainties, huge focus on quality and safety. And if we now go and look at the last year, 2 years in COVID-19, we were able to develop vaccines within a period less than 1 year. I want to demonstrate and particularly focus this presentation on mRNA, which is not a novel platform. It's been around for 40 years. mRNA research focusing on the value of mRNA in therapeutic development, and yet during COVID-19 we were able to demonstrate how mRNA can be a rapid platform for innovation and vaccine manufacturing. So this is the complex history of mRNA, again demonstrating deep science and deep technical capabilities required over many, many years to get a product that is suitable for human use. So COVID-19 vaccine development, this is a phenomenal story and a phenomenal case study for innovation. If we take into account that average vaccine development cycles are 10 to 12 to 14 years, in the case of COVID, 11 months since the design of a vaccine to being market authorization, being rolled out to people across the globe, and today more than 10 billion or 12 billion doses been administered with a huge impact on public health. We know that vaccinated people in the COVID pandemic had a 7 to 10 times bigger or a decreased death rate and a bigger protection, although it did not protect from infections, it protected from serious hospitalization and health. So a phenomenal public health innovation. Yet, all these developments and the success that has been demonstrated for COVID-19 vaccine development did not result into access and social justice for low and middle income countries. We all know the history. Already 6 months into vaccination programs in the global north, the global south had inadequate access to vaccines. So that has spearheaded a realization that we need to change systems and innovation in low and middle income countries to empower these countries to be able to do their own vaccine innovation and also to have the capability and the capacity to develop their own vaccines. So at the heart of this is this program initiated under the COVAX initiative in early 2021 and coordinated by World Health Organization. This is a program called the mRNA Hub program. The objective, the vision, is to create capacity, capability for low and middle income countries to produce vaccines. But more than that, to enable access to future relevant mRNA technologies for pandemic preparedness, for rapid vaccine development, and for empowerment of these countries to be able to produce their own vaccines. Lawrence, you mentioned the importance of capacity building. At the heart of this program are also building the workforce capabilities for these countries to be able to produce these vaccines. And we're happy to know that we're also going to work with the ICGEB in building and participating in the skills development. What is unique about this program? Let's talk about innovation at different levels. We know that traditionally technology transfer happens in a bilateral manner. It's structured, it's controlled, it's based on specific products, and it's transferred from one party to a second party. This program, in an unusual manner, will transfer technology in a multilateral arrangement, from a single source of development to multiple companies in multiple countries. That is quite unique, and there's significant systems innovation that will go with this development. The second part is, of course, this program will transfer future relevant mRNA technology capabilities to this network that I will outline in a moment. The other very innovative and important part of this program is the issues around intellectual property. How do we ensure that intellectual property does not hamper social justice? And how do we ensure in an open science system that we also do not compromise the value of intellectual property, which has demonstrated over many years to be important in public health and in other areas? And of course, how do we promote sustainability? So at the heart of a program that develops technology, transfer technology, there is a great sense of what will be required to make this sustainable. So this is the network that has been created through the mRNA Hub program. A hub based here in Cape Town, in a consortium, which I will unpack for you, that brings various components of sustainability and innovation to the program, but with 15 companies in 15 countries and low and middle income countries that will receive technology and will be empowered to produce mRNA-based vaccines. If we look at these 15 companies, there's another component of the deep thinking and the strategic structure of this program. These companies are different levels of maturity. There are about 5 or 6 of them that already are vaccine producers, that have quality management systems in place, that has regulatory systems in their countries that can allow them to receive and implement these technologies. These companies will be empowered to diversify their current vaccine manufacturing platforms to add COVID-19, to add mRNA platforms to it. The middle group is a group that are partly ready to receive technology, but will then be empowered to do mRNA vaccine development and innovation. And then there's a group that will be greenfield start-up as entities that will have the ability to do mRNA vaccine manufacturing. A powerful network, the biggest technology transfer program probably in the history of health sciences and health innovation. But how do you define a team like this? And I think that's one of the points that I think we're going to discuss later today. Multidisciplinarity. The requirements for an effective vaccine innovation system is the multidisciplinarity of it. How these different disciplines coming together in a synchronized manner to produce a product that has safety, efficacy, and a significant impact, positive impact on public health. The other component about the innovation in mRNA vaccine production. This is the convergence of biology and chemistry. This is one of the beautiful things about the mRNA platform. It can be a completely synthetic process, which is a chemistry process, or it can be a combination of biology and chemistry. So here in South Africa, group at University of Witwatersrand worked for 5 or 6 years on mRNA technology for therapeutic purposes, were able to partner with Afrigen, who has capabilities in formulation. Part of the challenges of mRNA vaccines is effective formulation. Bringing together public, private, and academic partnerships in a fast track, performance-orientated development that in a very short period of time, 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago, these teams were able to start in the labs, first waiting for raw materials to be received here at the southern tip of Africa, and within 2 months developed a lab-scale vaccine candidate, which now is in preclinical development. This candidate have been demonstrated already to show proof of concept in immunogenicity studies, very low reactogenicity, which means safety, good safety profiles, and very high neutralizing antibody activities. A group coming together with a mission and in a short period of time being able to develop a vaccine candidate that will go into clinical trials in the next few months and show non-inferiority against some of the existing mRNA vaccines. The profound importance of this value chain innovation is that this builds a platform that will be transferred to 15, maybe 17, maybe 20 other companies in low and middle income countries, sharing in an open science model the ability to produce mRNA vaccines. In South Africa, very important, the consortium here putting together public, private partnerships with the Medical Research Council, BioVac as the first recipient of the technology, Afrigen developing the technology in partnership with international experts and local universities, taking a full development cycle from an investigational new drug, first ever on the African continent. This will be a product conceptualized, developed, designed, developed, and taken to clinical development, first time for the African continent from as an IND, taking right through to clinical development. What is also important in innovation is that we have integrated research development capabilities and infrastructure. It is impossible to do vaccine innovation or most innovations, technological innovations, without facilities designed in an integrated manner to support that innovation. And that's another point that I want to share as essential. Technology packages. Another very unconventional, unusual thing about this program is technology transfer usually happens in a turnkey product that's ready for market, transferred between two companies. This program is doing technology transfer in a phased and staged manner. Start with training, because this is new, novel, revolutionized technology for vaccine manufacturing. Then stage one, package two, package three. Very unusual, because this is about speed, this is about empowerment. The teams working together with Medicines Patent Pool, WHO, Afrigen, and Consortium will, in a stepwise manner, ensure that we build the platform in the network and transfer technology in a de-risked but fast-track approach to build for sustainability. Another critical component is, how do we build a workforce? How do we build the knowledge base? So this program, already in the early stages, within 2 weeks after the first lab-scale vaccine candidate was developed, and we know that we have early animal data that supports a proof of concept, the knowledge sharing started. From February this year, already we started training the network and spokes, and by the end of this year, 10 of the 15 will be through Cape Town, through the Afrigen facilities, learning about lab-scale mRNA vaccine innovation and production. mRNA, this is incredibly future-relevant technology. COVID-19 with Moderna and BioNTech has demonstrated the value of this platform for vaccine manufacturing. The other beautiful component of mRNA technology is the fact that it is scale out, it is modular, it leans itself towards smaller facilities that can run quite cost effectively. This technology allows us to challenge the paradigm that vaccine production facilities need to be massive, needs to be large economies of scale, and needs to be produce 1 billion doses to be financially sustainable. This is another innovation that's being brought into the empowerment of companies to produce mRNA vaccines or vaccines for various diseases, is the economies of scale, the unit of economics are changing and is being challenged. Also, what is important for sustainability? We have a platform that has been demonstrated in COVID-19 to be effective to produce a vaccine within 11 months. But there's only one product at the moment in the market utilizing one vaccine utilizing this platform. It is essential that in a fast-track, innovative manner, there's a pipeline of products being developed that can be produced on these platforms as multi-product platforms as a critical component for sustainability. So here in South Africa, in partnerships, and now expanding that to also the network of 15 countries and companies, is to build a platform for vaccine innovation using mRNA as a rapid response and a rapid screening platform for vaccine development. The overall strategy of vaccine development is no different from mRNA than it is for any other of the platforms. It has to go through process of discovery, preclinical, clinical, and full clinical development. What we have seen with mRNA is that the point of discovery, concept to phase 1, can be rapidly contracted in fast track. And because this is demonstrated and starting to be considered and accepted as a true platform, even in some cases, clinical development could be quite fast-tracked. Sustainability. The other component that's critical for sustainability is how do we design these facilities? And the WHO is working now with multiple partners to look at size of these facilities, investment in CapEx versus OpEx, and how do we build fast and sustainable facilities that is affordable and can be sustainable. Intellectual property. We cannot talk about innovation without recognizing the value of intellectual property. Inventiveness and novelty stimulates innovation. But in mRNA, because of the value of the platform, the intellectual property landscape is complex. So the stimulation for us is also to innovate around restrictions that we may have in intellectual property, but also to build the partnerships to ensure that we have freedom to operate. Another point is very important. Across this program, innovation needs to happen not only technologically, but in regulatory, and that an ecosystem, and I think that's my last slide, an ecosystem like what the Partners for African Vaccine Manufacturing has created needs to be established and sustained to ensure that what we've built from a technological innovation perspective is ultimately translated into a public health benefit, and that it ultimately stimulates the development and the production of vaccines in low and middle income countries, particularly in the African continent, as a socio-economic development imperative. So, creation of an ecosystem, absolutely essential. My last slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, so we're going to the final presentation, and that'll be from Charles, and he will be speaking about the simple notion that you can't really ensure social justice without access. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Lawrence and ICGB for inviting me. So, no slides. So you get your eyes get a bit of a rest. And I'm going to go slightly off message because I'm not going to talk about science because I'm not a scientist. I'm going to talk much more about the social justice. And so the organization I run, the Medicines Patent Pool, was set up actually largely as a result of what was happening in South Africa. That's where the sort of idea came from around HIV. And the lack of access to affordable drugs for HIV in low and middle income countries. And so it was set up in 2010 to address this. And the idea was that we would go to the originators of patented the best new drugs and say, if you give us a license, we will then sub-license it to generic manufacturers who will make affordable versions of this for sale at affordable prices in low and middle income countries. And our argument was, and remains, these are countries where you're simply not going to get the return that you really want. So you're probably not even going to register in a lot of these countries. We will do all that for you. We will manage the generics, make sure that the products that they produce do not go into your high-income markets where interfering with your profits. And it was, a lot of people said this can't be done. For the first couple of years, it was really touch and go. Is anybody actually going to give us a license? And the National Institutes of Health in America gave us our first license, and that triggered a wave of new licenses. And what this has meant is that in HIV, by the end of this year, our generic manufacturers, through our licenses, will have been able to deliver close to, if not exactly, 30 billion doses to low and middle income countries. That's a lot of drug. And a one-year HIV treatment, which is like $10,000 in high-income countries, is available in South Africa for around 50 for the whole year. That's amazing. And so this is all about social justice. This is all about this concept that here we are, we're at the end of 2022, and still we have drugs, they're there, they're being developed, they're available, but just not in the majority of the world. And if they are available, they're not affordable. And so people die when the drug is there. It's like, it's insane. So we have been focused very much on, it started with HIV and then we expanded to hepatitis. And then along came COVID. And we said, this is a perfect opportunity to give us licenses for this. This is a pandemic, this is an emergency. And very much like HIV, you have these terrible things that happen, like COVID, but there are some good things that can come out of it. And I think our licensing model that came out of HIV is a really good thing. And what Petro was talking about in terms of the mRNA tech transfer hub is a really good thing that's come out of COVID. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But so, as you know, in the vaccine space, this did not happen. But then when the antivirals started being invented, they did give us licenses. So we have licenses for Merck's drug, for Pfizer's drug, most recently for Shionogi's antiviral. And this is a step forward. But, you know, this is a small bit of health, infectious diseases. NCDs have been really a barren landscape in terms of this licensing. The pharma companies have been really unwilling to give us licenses. And so a bit over a month ago, when we signed the first license for a cancer treatment, there's a real breakthrough. And of course, we are in an environment now where there's so much focus on equitable access as a result of COVID. And as you know, there's a lot of discussion going on at the World Trade Organization. South Africa, together with India, have put forward this idea of a waiver of intellectual property, initially for vaccines. Wasn't really a waiver that was agreed in the end, but they're now discussing, and they have to decide by the 17th of this month whether to extend that to therapeutics and diagnostics. Diagnostics, it probably won't be so relevant, but therapeutics, yes. So what this means is that the pharmaceutical industry have suddenly realized that access is right up there at the top of the priorities. And we can't go on with this idea that you produce a new, whatever it may be, a drug or a vaccine, and you make it available in high-income countries, and then a few years later you think, oh, should we do something about, you know, low and middle-income countries? This is about thinking about it at the beginning, ideally at the R&D stage. And my personal aim is that by the time I retire, which is going to be about 5 years' time, every single new product comes to market in the US or wherever it might happen to be, Europe, with an absolutely thought-through access plan as to how this is going to become available within ideally a year in all low and middle income countries. That's what this is about. And it takes time to produce generic versions of drugs. So you've got to go through you know, all the bioequivalence and the stability tests and first of all the development to make sure that they get it right and so on. It's long, and then they have to go through quality assessment. We insist that they either go through WHO PQ or, if possible, the FDA. So this is important. This takes time. So in order for this to happen virtually simultaneously when something becomes available in high-income countries, there's got to be a lot of thinking beforehand. Licenses signed really early. So that's the aim. And we don't want to be in a position where, you know, people are dying when there's a drug available and they just can't get it. And there is a lot of room for affordability, because when a drug development company produces a drug, the most important thing for them is to be first at the market. That means that they have limited time to come up with an optimum process. So there's enormous room for the generics to optimize, lower the cost of goods. Plus, of course, they've not got all the development costs of the drug. And what you pay for in a high-income country is not the development cost just of that drug, it's many of the failures to get there. because hopefully that will all change with better AI and so on. But at the moment, there's a huge amount of failure. So there's a huge amount of investment just to get one drug out. And so this means that the price differential that I gave you on the HIV drug is sort of typical of the sort of reductions that it's possible to achieve. And so they can really become affordable. And so when COVID came along and this demand from member states in low and middle income countries to WHO to really give them access to their own production, and the setting up of this program that Petra has described so clearly. We were asked to assist in this because of our expertise in intellectual property, because of the licensing work that we do as a normal run-of-the-mill our day job. And so we'd not done vaccines before, but it's really the licensing part of it and that we took on. And we were also asked to do, rather weirdly, the resource mobilization for this. And I mention this because we have the program to support Afrigen and Biovac, who are going to be the first sort of commercial producer in Africa and South Africa, and the South African MRC to do the R&D work that Petra was talking about. We got a total budget of about $120 million, and we pretty much covered that. And it's come from high-income countries. And that's really interesting, because what that says is there's a real need and desire from low and middle-income countries to have this kind of their own production. But there's also a big interest in high-income countries in supporting this, which means we have a window of opportunity here to make this kind of thing work. However, COVID is winding down, maybe. That interest in doing this may well wane. And what it is going to require is a lot of advocacy to keep this going. Now, you are, by the look of it, mostly scientists, if not all of you are scientists. So I'm sure you think advocacy is something that other people do. I'm very sorry to tell you that is not the case. You all have a responsibility in this. If you want to change the world, you have to speak up. And one of the ways we have to change the world is in equitable access to health products. And I would like you to, when you leave here today, think and discuss amongst yourselves, what can I do to change that? What can I personally do? It's really important. Everybody could be an advocate. And if you are, it makes a real difference with your government. South African president came by our stand yesterday, and this is what I said to him. I said, please, we need leadership in this. Step up across Africa. If Africa is going to stand on its feet, and this is a great example, the mRNA hub, then we need leadership. But the leaders in Africa need to hear from the people in Africa that that's what you want them to do. So please, go out of here and think about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I do want to invite the audience to ask you questions, but let me give you a few questions to chew on while we invite colleagues to ask questions. And I'll start with you, Charles, because you don't mind being controversial. One of the things we learned from COVID is that whether we like it or not, in the Global South, we are part of a global supply chain. And however we try to innovate, however much we try to come up with new technologies, we are always going to be outnumbered, outmaneuvered, outpowered by the global north. Now, COVID taught us that it's possible that you can have right in front of us, as you said, we saw it with antiretroviral treatment, but with COVID we saw it that right in front of our eyes, other people can have vaccines when people are dying here. Now, advocacy can take us somewhere, but we need instruments that can ensure that there is fairness, the kind of fairness that you're talking about in terms of ensuring equity within a year of product development. Is that even possible? Should we even dare to dream as the Global South? And how are we going to achieve that when, if you set up an mRNA hub, BioNTech can come and set up something else in West Africa? And it really does have a lot to do with the fact that, you know, people control intellectual property as an instrument. So can you just tell us, let us in, those who are here, who are trying to innovate, what hope is there for them?
Okay. Thank you for that question. Don't give up hope. No, this is, okay, this is what I'm talking about advocacy. I didn't go in to tell you what you need to advocate for, so now I've got an opportunity to do that. Okay, what governments have to do is to put in place policies that make this possible and support this. And it's not something you can do overnight. So, you know, an example, India, a low and middle income country, turned itself into a massive supplier. They're now producing intellectual property a lot. Okay, but the government had a 20-year plan with policies that promoted this, that protected local production, allowed them to get off the ground. You know, there's so many things that have to go into this. You've got to have training, you've got to have the jobs, you've got to be able to retain people. This is not easy, but you've got to have a plan. And at the moment, I'm not sure that I see a plan in Africa yet. Okay. We have PAVM, that's a good start, but it's got to go a lot further. It needs to be much broader, because this isn't just about health and health security, it's about industrialization, it's about progress, it's about, we cannot go on with this idea that the global north will do everything and then, you know, sort of give it to low and middle income countries. It's just, it's not sustainable. And it's, I mean, it exasperates me that what it needs is a mindset change. It's like, stop asking yourself if you can do this. Ask yourself how you can do it. That's a very different question, because it assumes that you can. And I think that's where you need to start. Okay. So, sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Can you pass the mic to Thomas? Thomas, a few weeks ago, I was in a similar seminar where we were talking about genetic engineering and gene editing. And they showed us a map that the expertise for that is predominantly in the global north, and the capacity to do that predominantly in the global north. And these disruptive technologies are great. But Charles just said that, you know, we are unfortunately facing the reality that a lot of that innovation actually is coming from the global north. Now we are talking about brain organoids and organoid intelligence and how it can actually replace animal testing. You know, I visited an animal research facility, and I was just excited about the possibilities of dealing with the value of death, you know, because of the infrastructure that we had there. But now all of a sudden, the global network and the global policy is that we need to stop doing animals, research in animals. In Africa, we don't really have a problem. Okay, this is controversial. We don't really have a problem in terms of access to animals and using animals. But can you just let us know, how do we level the playing field when yes, of course, there's so much advance in the world that you are based in. I'm hearing about it for the first time. And yes, I would like to have access to it, but can you just tell us, how do we level the playing field there?
Okay, so that's a big bucket of questions. If it comes to animals, I did my share of animal experiments, but over the last 30-something years I'm in the business, I've learned that they're as much misleading as they are helping us. And I would say that we developed vaccines for COVID within 1 year was possible because we skipped most of the animal tests. That we had essentially a 100% success rate for 9 vaccines, where normally 6% of vaccine projects lead to a product, has to do with the fact that 2 months after the sequence of the virus was known, the first person was injected with a vaccine. There was not a single relevant animal experiment done at this time point. Some were done later while the clinical trials took place. Animal tests are also not cheap tools. They are costly. Most of the new tools are 1/10 of the costs. Many of them can be robotized, can be done on very large scale and much faster. The pharma companies of the North are all investing into these. And the access to these technologies in principle is there. Our academic systems are all set up for sharing. We have essentially every nationality in our university, and there's no limit of sharing these technologies. Okay. I think it is about effectively transferring these technologies and building up infrastructure which is about sharing. The problem is much more an economic one than it is a technological or scientific one. What you describe for not getting access to drugs even happens between the US and Europe. Drugs are about 5 times to 10 times more expensive in the US. That's why we have this big share. Half of the drugs registered in the US will not even be registered in Europe. My copay in the US for my insurance is often more expensive than buying the same drug in Europe on my own as a physician. So there is the same gradient already, which is just a bit more extreme here. And I think there should be a worldwide interest of simply organizing equal access and equity to health opportunities.
Okay, Pedro, 2 questions. At the end of the day, a large part of, you've worked in industry for many years, a large part of it is about money and making money. And a lot of innovators approach this from the perspective that they want to make money when they innovate. Now, can you let us in here? Is this true? Is it really all about money? Because if it is, then the game is already skewed. That is one question. The second question for you is the fact that, yes, we've got a nice innovation in mRNA, and people who are proponents of mRNA are essentially saying that that is the way to go. It needs to be the platform for all future vaccines. Now, again, we have made a lot of progress in terms of trying to build other platforms for vaccines. What's going to happen? Are you eliminating us? I mean, I'm not seeing justice in that.
I'm going to take your second question first. So mRNA is not the solution for all vaccines.
Thank you.
The requirement is multiple platforms, and the requirement is even to use conventional platforms which are 30 years old in Africa's settings because of affordability and because of efficacy and safety. So I think there are multiple platforms required. The beauty of mRNA is that it leans itself towards pandemic preparedness. You can screen fast, and the modalities of size is very different. So you can have a facility with 3 or 5 million vials running cost effectively and profitably. So let me lead to your first question, money. Depends on where you sit.
Explain.
So for us, let me use the mRNA Hub program. This program, what is vested into Afrigen, we're a PTY Limited, by the way, biotech startup, pre-revenue earning with investors. So for our own survival and financial sustainability, we need to reach a point where we earn more than we spend.
Right.
The mRNA Hub program was ring-fenced within this company in full consent by our shareholders, of which 65% of our shares is held by a private company, which is about to list, going for listing. And that company, which I often say they have a heart for Africa, was prepared to redirect resources, a half-completed facility, and ring-fence it in a non-for-profit initiative to ensure access. If you may have been in a different company in big pharma somewhere else, that would have never, ever happened.
Right.
So at the end of the day, still, for this program to be sustainable, the recipients, the commercial entities that will receive this technology must operate in a financial sustainable manner. Whether it is necessary to earn $1,000 per second profits is a different discussion. I think there's a balance that needs to be brought back, also as part of social justice, and that maybe we should tone down the greed that sometimes sits in big pharma.
So it's not about making $1 billion and retiring at 30 years old, right?
No.
Lawrence, Pedro is saying you need to have a heart. Now, a large part of it requires values. You know, humanity's values, you know? Now, you've been, again, likewise in the industry for a long time. Is it possible for us to somehow train people who are innovators or identify innovators with a heart that can essentially infiltrate the space and inject into it the kind of heart that we need for people to understand that, yes, try to break even, but don't get greedy? Is that even possible?
I hope so. No, I mean, it's part of the training process. We're fortunate to have people coming from all over the world. Many are from what I would consider low resource environments. And I would say a vast majority that I encounter, and they want to go back and do something. It's there. A lot of people, I think, I'm an optimist. I think most people want to do good. Okay, there's always the ones who want to go out and make $1 billion and that's it. But I think you have to believe in humanity, that most people really want to make a difference. And certainly what I see in the people who comes through, you know, they'll go to the States after they've been through it, they'll do wonderful postdocs and whatever. But at the end of the day, they want to go back and they want to be able to see a change in their communities and improve things. So I think part of it is what you expose people to and the ethos of really showing yourself that you really want to try and make a difference. I think that's important. And I think generally speaking, a lot of people don't want to go back and sort of have an outfit where they're bringing in $1 billion a year. They want to be able to survive, they do well, but make sure that the populations around them can also access the technologies that's going to make their lives better. I think you can always provide pushes as well. I think governments need to play a role. You can provide various forms of incentives to companies to not to be too greedy and to set mechanisms. Yeah, all those sort of things, you know, brakes on tax, support for development. You know, one of the biggest problems, and you know, Petra's much better place to say than I am, but you know, one of the issues is always investment in plant, for instance, and when you're developing production capabilities. If governments are far-sighted, they will see that an investment today, if managed appropriately, can run for 20, 30 years in various forms of different production. But that investment is something that they have to negotiate with the company and make sure that once they've done that, the company doesn't then run off and make billions out of it. So there's ways in which it can be done.
Is there room for this narrative that says we need to shift from just the focus on STEM towards STEAM, where we include the A that represents the arts in the training? Is that something that can make a difference in your view?
I think it probably, yeah. I think, you know, many educational establishments are now within the scientific sector are including art, exposure, and what I would call humanities.
Humanities, yeah.
And I think it has a place. I think it definitely does have a role. And especially when you think about education in you know, social justice, awareness of the realities that people face in low resource environments, particularly in rural settings, I think is very important, and people need to be made aware.
Okay, I think we have exhausted our time, but let me invite people in the audience to make quick comments or questions. Maybe I'll take 5 hands for 1 round.
It is an excellent panel, excellent discussion. 3 simple questions. Why are countries like US, Canada, or Germany not a member of ICGB? Second, what is the name? What is the name of the African approval agency like FDA and EMA in Europe? And my third question goes to you. My institution produces organoids, brain organoids, heart organoids. When do we have the ethical discussion if these organoids are real organs and it's not allowed to develop and produce them?
Please note those questions will come.
Thank you. My name is Ioan Jele from Romania. I'm the Vice President of the Academy of Agriculture and Forestry Sciences. Then my question in this perspective, if the biotechnology can be a solution to mitigate the impact of climate changes in agriculture and for example, by creating of new varieties of plants which are more adapted to climate changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentations. Mine is a concern on the education system. What's your look or your view about our education system, especially in Africa? Students saying or a university running biotechnology course and yet they don't have a lab. And such kind of the product in terms of human resource that we have, or either infrastructure institution as well as the personnel. What's your view and comparative to your countries or your developed world? And the other aspect is, should we start early to engage and change the attitudes, especially at primary school and such, so that when it comes to adoption of these technologies, we don't have impediments? Thank you.
I'll try and be really brief. Lawrence, I think it would be helpful if you would explain very quickly to people, how does a country apply to belong to ICGB? What are the costs approximately? And which countries are excluded? Because I think that would answer the question of ICGB's social justice position. And Petro, for you, a 3-word question. African swine fever?
Okay, so the ethics question is absolutely important. It's important also that we develop a clear terminology, what is what. And we are working with the Berman Institute of Bioethics on this topic, and we have a series of activities defining exactly this, which is critical for the field. And the only other remark I wanted to make is we should not underestimate how much the entrepreneurial state is important in this development. Most developments were not started by companies because they don't have a 10, 20-year view on developing something. It is important that countries, with their support to research and directing programmed research, are initiating the right developments. Then the tech companies harvest it and make it profitable technologies, but they come in relatively late in the game.
Okay, so the first question relating to membership of ICGB, of which there was two that were connected, we don't exclude anybody. Anybody can join the organisation, and we're working very actively to expand our membership. The reasons for the lack of the big industrial countries being part is rather historical. We were founded originally back in the early 80s, when developments of biotechnology were essentially largely focused in the US and Europe. And the founders, which actually was organized through the United Nations, and UNIDO was the agency, they wanted an organization which was focused on what we will call now the global south. And so the vast majority of the early membership was indeed what we will call developing countries. Now, however, I'm working very actively to try and expand that membership, and we would be delighted if countries like Canada or the US would care to join. Obviously, many countries have their own bilateral programs. It's a government decision to join ICGB. It requires a treaty, which is deposited in the UN, just like any other UN agency. So there has to be a political will within that country to be part of something like we are. So I hope that answers that question. In terms of the cost, a least developed country, for instance, which is the majority of which is in ICGB, it's $5,000 a year. It's a token gesture. And even our most developed country, such as China or Brazil, are only paying $150,000. So, you know, the money we're talking about is really very small, and I have to really emphasize again that we're really supported very heavily by the Italian government, by the South African government, and by India, and they're the ones that make a lot of what we do possible. Finally, there was a question from Romania about the role of biotechnology in agriculture and climate change. I would say absolutely, and it's already happening in many, many parts of the world. And I think Europe has to really revise very seriously its policies on implementing these new technologies. You know, there's a classic example now of genome editing, where in India they have been very reluctant to take on new technologies related to genetic engineering in crops and so on and so forth. But they've now finally approved genome editing. And this is going to have a massive impact in that country in terms of what crops can be developed and made resistant to various forms of stressors and be able to grow in really challenging environments. So it's already happening.
Laurence, can you comment on the issue of education?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, clearly capacity needs to be improved across the board. It's, you know, some places are really, really good, but the lack of access to labs and knowing basic skills in a lab is really holding people back. You know, I still see this. I will see people come who have really great on paper knowledge. They have the theoretical knowledge, but when I give them a pipette, you know, it's a challenge. So yeah, we absolutely need to do more in that. And obviously, the more up the scale you go, when you start to look at manufacturing processes and things like that, then again, it's a big challenge, and it's something that we're really, really working to try and address.
So let me take the regulatory question first. So in South Africa, it's SAHPRA, South African Health Product Regulatory Agents. So the African continent have now created AMA, the African Medicines Agency, which will coordinate and harmonize across the continent. In Africa, there's five countries that has reached ML3 or 4 WHO rating and are considered as stringent regulatory authorities. In the case of SAHPRA, they harmonize with the FDA and the EMEA, so they well harmonize with stringent regulatory authority. So on the continent, regulatory, there's major efforts also from WHO to build up the regulatory system, because without that, we will not have vaccine manufacturing or even API manufacturing systems in place. African swine fever, as you know, Afrigen also has a veterinary program. And it's interesting, African swine fever will lean itself towards an mRNA platform. So we are open to business for the owners of antigens that can work with us in collaborative research and development agreements to design the construct suitable for mRNA production. So come visit. And then, can I comment on the education question? I think it's such a critical issue. We've shared yesterday, if we look at current world population growth, by 2030, 1 in 4 people on this globe will live on the African continent. We will have 25% of the world population. The average age will be 19.4 years. We are building the workforce for future. It is imperative that we increase education from primary school level. It is imperative that we have policies in place that will develop internships. It is imperative that we build vertically integrated industries that can absorb and create jobs for these young people. There's an assessment recently being done by PATH and Gates Foundation with the Partners for African Vaccine Manufacturing. And the indications are that we need 12,000 people to be trained in the next 5 years just to meet the development that is happening in manufacturing. So I think like access is becoming a critical global priority. Africa, socio-economic development is also becoming a global priority, and skills and workforce development is critical to that.
Can I make just 2 very quick comments? One is that Thomas's point about so much of the funding, long-term research comes from governments, and now is this perfect opportunity to get governments, when they license it out to the pharmaceutical industry or big industry anyway, to put in access terms in that. And that is something that's happening now. So that's, I think, very positive. And then secondly, to your slightly pessimistic view of big pharma, my experience of dealing with big pharma is that the people in R&D, the people at the lower levels are totally committed to access. The higher you get up the company, the more the pressure to hit targets on sales starts taking that away. And the people at the bottom are really, really patient-centered. But that changes. However, the good news is that investors are beginning to think, well, we want a good return, but we also want to do some social good. So there's a big group of investors now who are demanding that access is part of what pharma does. So these are encouraging things, and we need to. I want to send you away on a positive note here.
On that note, let's stop there. I want to invite you to come forward and interact with the panel, because I believe we're out of time, right? And can we give them a round of applause? It's been an amazing session. But all those of you who had your hand up, please come forward. Let's engage with the panelists. Thank you, colleagues.